going to start and probably end with song. Feel free to join, even though we're muted, we can still open our mouths and our hearts. The lyrics will be shared in the chat and on the screen. And before the sit, I'll say why these words today. Min hametzar karatia anani v'merchavya min hametzar karatia anani v'merchavya Lilo ira Min hametzar karatia anani v'merchavya Min hametzar karatia anani v'merchavya Lilo ira Yaseh li adam Ay da 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 Ya da 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 Ya da 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 Ya da 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 So why these words today? Harry, leave the slide up just for another moment. Min ha-metzar, from the narrowness, from the constriction, from the tight places. In the calendar, we're in a time called the 3 weeks in English, but in the traditional language, bein ha-metzarim, within the narrows. The 3 weeks between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av are the spiritual nadir, low point of the year. And I always thought it strange when I first kind of encountered this at Jewish summer camp, that at the time of year that most people look forward to in terms of there's no school and it's vacation and the sun is shining, that we would encounter themes of brokenness and grief and destruction. But that is somewhere we are, not only in the Jewish calendar, but I think for many of us are experiencing a lot of narrowness, constriction. So maybe we'll come back to the slide, but I'd love to be able to see folks' faces again. The theme I want to invite to our sitting practice, our silent practice, is being with the exhalation, being with surrender, being with the bottom of the breath, the depth of the breathing cycle. And there's really nothing to do. There's um, nothing to change here. But I do want to point out that when we remind ourselves or each other to breathe, we usually emphasize the inhalation. Even saying that, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. If you've been holding your breath, maybe you want to just take a moment to notice where that holding happens or happened on that breath. And again, on this breath, to notice if you're holding. But as we sit, to really allow the object of our awareness to be the emptying. And I'll acknowledge outright, just as the second verse there says Lo ira, God is with me, I do not fear. Some fear can come up if we really rest in that moment before inhalation. So even before we kind of go into the sitting practice now, just anytime the next exhalation comes, it's hard for me to instruct this while also practicing it. Don't rush to the next inhalation. And perhaps notice when you allow the breath to settle in its out phase, where the depths may be in your body, maybe where the rushing or the fear or the grief or even just the tendency to breathe for the sake of the next breath may be coming from. Sitting with ourselves in whatever state of exhaustion or elation, readiness or unreadiness. Being curious about the phase of the breath that's still. Or at least more relatively still than the inhalation, which fills and changes us. And the exhalation, which requires a softening, requires a surrender. I see lots of signs in my neighborhood that say resist, and I love the impulse behind them. And this is a practice of non-resistance, which is not to say we're satisfied or happy with what we may be experiencing. There's maybe a degree of unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, suffering, meitzar, narrowness. But not to be allied, not to skip over that as a real part of our lives and a real part of our calendar and a real part of our experience. So as Kashira said, this is a blessed opportunity to be together in practice. So at the exhalation, we also make space for each other. It's really supportive to be Havaya li lo ira. God is with me. Maya aseli Adam, what can be done with me? So the sense of feeling connected to each other as we take a moment to connect more directly and with fewer words and fewer guidance to the breath as it is, the body as it is. In the second paragraph of the Shema, where it says, if we don't listen, if we don't pay attention, Meira, will be kind of quickly destroyed or quickly banished. My teacher, Reb Zalman, said, "Your rush," translated this, "your rushing will destroy you. Your mehirut, your meheraness, your quickness will be the banishment from this experience." So how slow can you go? Getting really curious, really granular, really specific. Where does the next exhalation leave your sensation? And from within that emptying out, where are you answered with the next merchavya, the next expanding breath? And as I soften around the places I do hold habitually, of my signature gripping and familiar kind of embodied complaints, it takes a kind of energy or courage or faith to continue to keep our attention with it. You may notice a softening or a tearing in the eyes as I do. A gentle return to the breath and body as they are, without pushing, without trying to change, trying to be with as is. Not knowing the quality or flavor of the next breath that comes. Just like watching waves on the shore. No two are the same. Yet they all return to the ocean, to the Nenu Malay, never full. Oh, this practice is never ending. It's never satisfied. It's never over. So if you're waiting for the end, it can be very exhausting. slipping into the ocean of breath being breathed. And if you find yourself somewhere in the future or in the past, going over memories or plans, welcome the constraint, welcome the Meitzar of this moment. Keep yourself, there's an invitation to be in the discipline of the specificity, the narrowness of now. Which is held in the responsiveness of Merchavya, the always now. Min hametza karatia.
Thank you, Shir. Such beauty. And the track record continues of just allowing for heldness and being in the present moment. So thank you. Take a few moments now, continuing our practice of reciting Mourner's Kaddish for those among us who are mourning. This is a traditional way of honoring the memory of those who have come before through prayer and praise. If you'd like to put into the chat the names of those who you are remembering and uplifting today, please feel welcome. And if you would like to come off mute so we can respond to one another, that's available too. We join together saying, Yit Gadal, V'Yit Gadash.
Shmei Rabbi, Yama Dibra
Glorified and
Hirufute,
sanctified be the great
Yamlich
name of God,
Malkute,
the world created according to the divine will. God's sovereignty soon be established in our lifetime, and that of the entire house of Israel. Amen. May God's great name be praised in all eternity. Hallowed are his glorious hour. The blessed Holy One, praise above all praises, him and the gods of adoration, soon be established. Amen. The whole house of Israel be accepted, parent of us all. Amen. And abundant peace and light to us, all Israel. Amen. May God who ordains harmony in the universe grant peace to us and to all Israel. Amen.
Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens bring peace and comfort to all of us in mourning, as we say, Amen.
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 Thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to Rabbi Shir and to Harry on tech support. Wishing you an early Shabbat Shalom. For those who need to hop off at the hour, please feel welcome. And if you'd like to stay on, questions in the chat are welcome. And we'll be here just for about 15 minutes together. Shir, firstly, there are some questions popping up. I want to just reflect back an appreciation for the redefinition of narrowness. I think sometimes because of the way that narrowness is portrayed, that there's a kind of, that there's gonna be a squeeze, there's gonna be a compression, it's gonna be difficult to get through. And what I experienced today was that by allowing the narrowness without resisting it, without feeling like I need to push back, to just be in the space of moving through, there was relief in it. So thank you for creating that. There's a question in the chat that asks if you can please explain about these 3 weeks of narrowness, maybe just a little bit of context for what the 3 weeks is.
Sure. The going kind of back, chronologically out of order, the 3 weeks we're counting up to is Tisha B'Av, the destruction of the temples, and the 17th of Tammuz, 3 weeks earlier, represents the beginning of that siege, the breach of the walls. And both of those dates have accrued a lot of historical memory for various different tragedies that befell the Jewish people. So at the heart of it is the breaching of the walls of Jerusalem and then the destruction of the temple, though things that have subsequently happened historically after those times, and then in the rabbinic mind, well before those times, including the destruction all the way back to the shattering of the tablets, the first tablets, are added to this calendrical season. So that's the brief lesson on what we're. It's about brokenness. It's about loss and grief and the shatteredness. And when I called it the nadir, that's an astronomical and also a medical term for the low point of a process. Actually, I just learned the medical definition is like, say, in a cancer treatment of chemotherapy, when the white blood cells are at their lowest count, that's the medical nadir. So it's a real time of vulnerability. And like you were saying, sometimes the resistance to that, it can be a real squeeze. It can hurt like hell. And it's a part of life. It's a part of living. And so to constantly turn away, to say, no, I'm on my summer vacation, increases the pain. The suffering is necessary. The pain is something we can work with.
Yeah, beautifully said. As you're describing the 3 weeks, I'm reminded of just the spiral linear nature of time, that from the perspective of where we are now, it doesn't necessarily matter in what order chronologically the things happen, but that as we return each year to this place in time, there's an amalgamation of grief that has kind of piled on itself. And so it makes sense that we might be feeling that, even if it's not the grief of the specific things that have happened, but this kind of cumulative grief. And I really appreciate that we have dedicated time that says, this is the time to feel that grief, to be with it, to work with it, to alchemize it. And also don't get stuck there, because shortly after the 3 weeks, it's time for love and time for joy. And we get delivered into something next. I've got another question in the chat. Heidi asks, could you reiterate or say more about noticing the problems of the world, particularly in America and the Middle East, but also staying in the present? I'm struggling with fear, anger, and feeling hopeless. Shamati, Heidi, thank you for this beautiful question.
Your fear, your anger, and your hopelessness in the light of whatever it is you're seeing, wherever it may be, in the news, in the world, in your family, in yourself, shows you who you are and what matters to you, matters to us. I mean, I only have a certain tolerance. I mean, probably lower than I imagine I should have for current events, for reading the news, for staying abreast, because it is so exquisitely painful and feels unfortunate, and just it seems like a lot of cruelty and greed and ignorance. And they live within the values of like, I wish it weren't so, because of what my beliefs about what this world should be and who it should be for and how we should all belong. So within our own individual windows of tolerance for looking at the state of affairs in the United States. I mean, when we say our country, this is a beautiful global sangha. I assume we're not all calling in from the United States. But wherever we look, we can see a lot of pain, a lot of fear. That I reframed that second verse. So the second, Mina Meitzar as a verse is a more familiar one. The next line immediately after is less so. Adonai li lo ira, God is with me. I'll give you a straight translation. God is with me, I do not fear. Maya aseli adam, what could a person do to me, right? If I have pure faith with God, I'm spiritually invincible. God is my armor, God is my shield, God is my, like, that's a traditional understanding of that line. Maya aseli adam, I reframe that as understanding what can a person do? What can I do? How can I live out my humanity? So given, I'm also not making assumptions about our political hashkafot here or worldviews here, but we see people doing things or acting in a certain way, or resources being allocated in one way. And if it does break our heart, if it does cause grief, and if it does cause pain, that says a lot about our values. And that kind of brings me back, the circular nature of the Nigun, back to calling out to God, like, wait a second. I thought people were good. I thought governments were good. I thought the world was abundant and beautiful and peaceful. What about that? And that kind of shaking our fist at God, that kind of thing, including that in our prayer, including our grief, um, is something that's sometimes skipped over, elided, or not matured, right? I think a lot of us get kind of stuck at kind of pediatric theology, and to have an adult theology, we have to bring our brokenness and our pain and our confusion and our lack of control to the conversation about what that means to be in divine relationship. I'll also say, like you said, something about the spiral linear nature of time. It's one of the reasons I put the shofar in the background as a model of not only the spiral linear nature of time, but it's a birth canal, and it's also narrow and expansive. Min hametzar, from the narrowness and the expanse, and as a model of the time we're going towards. A lot of people start thinking about the high holidays at the beginning of Elul, but some people start counting the whole 60 days from the 17th of Tammuz all the way through the end of Sukkot and Simchat Torah and Hoshana Rabbah. And so this as a birth canal, it's like we're planting seeds for the world we want to see, the people we want to be, the hope we have. And birth is a narrow place and very much a push.
Yeah. Thank you for this response and for the reminder. Sometimes it's a helpful starting place just to notice our own aversion to the grief, to what might arise, whether that's a fear of getting stuck there and not knowing how to navigate, feelings that can be overwhelming at times, isolation, loneliness, all the things that come, helplessness with that grief. And I particularly appreciate that, as you've described with this spiral of time keeps moving and everything changes. That it's okay.
Yeah. And that oceanic overwhelming, it's too muchness is a very real experience. And this is why we have Sangha. This is why we have practice. This is why we come together, because I cannot convince you otherwise, if you're in one of those this will never end kind of moments, that it will change. That does not seem available all of the time. However, grief is one of those things I feel like we really need to reframe as good. Good
Yes.
grief, and not be categorically and reactively averse to pushing it away. It's not pleasant. It's not painless. It's not pretty, but it's a part of what it means to be human and alive.
Exactly. And through our mindfulness practice, we become aware of our own reaction or response to rising grief. I want to bring in another question with some tenderness for Lori, who writes, last night visiting my dear friend in the hospital, saying goodbye as she was drifting away. Everything felt expansive, all love. She died this morning, and suddenly I feel in such a tight, constricted place. Do I stay in the constriction, or how do I come back to expansiveness? Sending you comfort and care, Lori. Thank you for this question.
Yeah, Lori, may our sitting, may our learning, may our being together be a blessing for the journey you are on, and your friend's spirit or soul may be on. What I hear in that question is the either orness, and the answer is yes. Like, because you experience expansiveness then and contraction now, means you're on a wave, and grief is unpredictable, and like I just said, messy, and it's not a linear trajectory. So you are now touching a moment of great contraction, and that's the nature of waves. They have cycles, and everything changes. That I pointed to in the breath. We're never even breathing into the same body twice. So the pain you may be feeling, the loss you may be feeling, the disorientation you may be feeling is only accessible now. And as much as you have the capacity and courage to be with what you're experiencing, you can experience it only now. And I don't know if those words are of comfort or of consolation. But maybe you're taking away from this sit, from this session, from this time, that there's a time to mourn and there's a time to dance, right? And we can't always predict how long those times will last, and when those numbers will come up. I'm sorry for your loss.
Echoing that sorrow, and just also acknowledging that we can easily get caught in the how we should be. And I mean, what I took away so much from today's practice is that being with what actually is, suspending judgment, bringing compassion and gentleness to ourselves. If constriction is what's currently happening, constriction is what's currently happening. And that there's no wrong way to be when we're visited by grief or when we're in the practice of grief. And to know, mindful awareness reminds us that it won't be like this forever, even when it doesn't feel possible that it'll ever change. I'll just share that I had the practice of saying a beautiful mourner's Kaddish. A group of rabbinical students some years ago rewrote a Kaddish that you can say when you don't have a minyan. And I had the practice of saying this Kaddish each night after my dad died. And as I got to the end of the days of Kaddish, I declared that I was not ready, that I would continue to say Kaddish for possibly ever. And wouldn't you know that just a few days after the conclusion of the natural time, I suddenly woke up one day and thought, I actually feel complete with Kaddish. I still think of my dad every day, but I no longer think of him in the framework of Kaddish. I have memories and, whatever kinds of conversations I can have with him now. But I was moved to notice that something I thought would never change just did in its time. And that my attention to it as it was, not as someone else or I dictated should be, allowed that constriction to open into more expansiveness. We have great questions in the chat. We will not get to all of them. Let me just go through here. As a question, do we need to mourn that our own LGBT community has abandoned us unless we prove ourselves to be, quote, good Jews? Or do we just cut them off too and create our own queer Jewish spaces? What a tender question. I'm wondering if you might have comment on this, Shir.
I'm not sure to whom I'm addressing or what communities are being addressed. But I do hear, do we need to? We need to do nothing. How do we be with that pain? Some pain is just unbearable. It does help to have others around. And sometimes those others are the more than human world. If we don't have, like practices like Kaddish without a minyan, or belonging without others, like our need to belong to something is so inherent that sometimes maybe that belonging is only the floor under your head, the tree in your favorite park, the river, the mountain, the text, the teacher, imagined or real. But the need to have a sense of belonging and the perfection of isness, of you as you are becoming, like wherever we are in our process, is so foundational. So I hear in that question just the pain of feeling othered and rejected and not belonging. And if there is a need in that, it's the need to find belonging again, which sometimes can feel like an excruciating and an unendurable period of not belonging. since grief is so up here, I'm not a direct student of Francis Weller, but Francis Weller is a teacher of many of my friends and some of my teachers. And he has a quote that says, grief and love are sisters. And I love that kind of personification of these emotional states as beings that are siblings and they're related and they're so intertwined. We grieve what we love, and we can love what we grieve. And these are radical messages. I did not grow up thinking grief was that I knew what it was, or that I could access it, or even still, there are parts of me like, do I feel like I even do it well? Who am I to talk about or teach grief, right? I stay out of the chat mostly because all of your offerings are so beautiful and I get distracted and overwhelmed, but I did happen to see someone's, I'll quote David White, who is definitely one of my teachers or inspirations as well, that the only cure for grief is grief, which is a very beautiful sentiment. The only way is through grief, but even grief, like, I guess, I don't even know if grief has a cure. Grief is uncurable. It's one of these qualities of, there's a line from the Mahabharata, a great Hindu epic, like this warrior is asked, what's the most astonishing thing? And he says that, at every moment, tens of thousands of creatures are dying and people go on living nonetheless. To really live with death in that way, to live with the fragility and the uncertainty and the dying nature of life is also the season we're preparing for by going through these narrows towards Yom Kippur, where we, in a certain way, rehearse our own return to the light or the dark.
That feels like a beautiful place to land. I'm reminded of what I heard from Octavia Rahim, who is an author and somatic practitioner this week. In one of her podcasts, she says that our practice reminds us who we are and whose we are. And so I just want to land us there, and may we all be reminded of who we are. May we all know whose we are, that we belong to ourselves, we belong to each other, we belong to the earth, we belong to creation, and to know our own sacredness, our own heldness, our own connectedness, even in the moments of grief, despair, isolation, and loneliness. May there always be joy and connection just around the corner. So with that, thank you to Shir. Thank you to all of you for your practice and presence. Shabbat Shalom, and hope to be together again soon.
Amen. Thanks.
Go well, everyone.